Well, for more on this story, we're joined now on State Line by Catherine Townsend, Chief Architect for the ACT. Welcome, Catherine. It's very early days in this process. The conversation formally has only just begun. What is your sense of the feedback, the level of community acceptance around these ideas?
Thanks, Greg. Look, it's no surprise that Canberra is full of very informed and intelligent people and who all have opinions about planning, and I'm not surprised that they've led the charge in responding to the government's publicity about this planning reform.
Positively, would you say?
Yes, yeah, very positively. I think, unsurprisingly, government is very careful about rolling out a planning reform such as this, but research has demonstrated that we don't need to wait for a housing crisis. This is changes to our planning structure that are logical and rational and really required in Canberra.
All right, but it does strike a raw nerve with some residents and property owners when it comes to urban infill. There are many complex considerations. Why don't we step through a couple of them? Do residents have to accept, Catherine, that their notions of privacy and solar access will have to be modified as developments come online using these principles? I'm
happy to say that there's no change to the neighbouring the rights of a neighbour on the solar access to their property. So the existing conditions around solar access to your indoor private living spaces and to your outdoor private living spaces, they remain as they are now. The same controls over privacy, interfacing and overlooking characteristics, they stay the same as they are. And I think that's an important benchmark to set when we roll out planning change.
Are you satisfied that they're adequate presently and therefore into the future?
I think these elements, you need to test them regularly, and part of this planning reform has been about testing those existing conditions, and I think they're appropriate where we sit.
All right, let's talk about car parking too, because you have a planning guide out there, or a design guide that people can view online. Car parking is provided for, but it does appear limited or more constrained than it has been in our suburbs until now. What is the general assumption about the number of car parking spaces per dwelling?
Well, the car parking provisions are, I mean, it's right to address this as a point that needs attention, and so government is very interested in being realistic about how many cars we have on site. In the past, there was a mandated minimum level for owners' cars, for visitors' cars, for a lot of car parking on site. We've looked at that and lowered the minimum levels. So reduce the. Broadly speaking, it's a guide, but it's less than it is at the moment. But then it needs to be taken on a case-by-case basis, so that we're really aware that in some areas of the territory, suburbs are already at capacity with on-street parking, and so in those areas, a development would require to be fairly self-supporting in the car parking.
Right, but because a typical family or typical couple these days, would you accept as a matter of design are two vehicles?
So that's how it works at the moment, that you provide a garaging for two vehicles. What we've got to do now is anticipate a very appreciably slow transfer to fewer vehicles, and so we don't build in structure at the moment that we can't manipulate or change down the track.
Why don't we see people with the excess vehicle, for want of a better term, just parking it out on the street? Because, to be honest, we see that already in parts of the inner north that have been developed with apartments.
And parking on the street is perfectly acceptable. It's been done in cities forever. If you
they can get clogged though.
It does get busier, and you know, as I said, there are some areas of Canberra that are at capacity for on-street parking, and so when a proposal comes forward in those areas, they will need to be self-supporting in their parking expectations.
Let's move on. Wholesale demolition in order to make efficient use of an existing block as you move multiple dwellings onto it. Is that likely to become more normal?
There already is a lot of, we call them knockdown rebuilds. I do expect to see demolition as not as the default response, but as logically as a common response when the influences of the block are being weighed up against the benefit that can be taken from the block. Demolition will depend on the condition of the current dwelling, its orientation, its siting, where other assets exist on the site, and you've always got to contemplate, you know, what easements are in existence, those sort of elements.
What about block consolidations? That's the term you use, Catherine, or for others, merging multiple blocks together. I think it is envisaged in this package of proposals, particularly down to levels of townhouses, terrace houses and the like. Do you encourage neighbours to start talking about that, or who would lead that merger process? Would it in fact be a property developer?
Well, one of the nice things about this planning reform is that it's quite democratic in that it's equally focused towards the mums and dads as well as the professional developers. And who has the conversations about consolidation? Certainly start with homeowners talking to your neighbours. Is this something you're interested in?
So people could sell at roughly the same time or jointly, is that the idea?
Well, you could choose to do a joint development or you could sell at the same time. There are many opportunities here. So I'm really pleased that this enables the general population to look after not only their future and their family's future, but also accommodate generations of Canberrans.
You also contemplate here something that is ever so slightly character changing to the suburbs, I suppose. That is non-residential use for a small or micro business in what you call RZ1 residential area. How widespread? There are some limited examples of that already. A pop-up cafe in Lawson is pretty well understood, I think, by most Canberrans. Will that become more common?
We're really interested to see how pop-up business, or not just pop-up businesses, but small businesses can interweave with a suburban fabric. It's got to be a business that supports the nature and the character of the community and the physical character of the suburb, and be really limited in the say the downsides. You know, any business that had a noise impact or noisy waste collection or created a parking problem,
strictly not allowed.
That wouldn't receive a positive hearing with government, but to establish businesses like that will require a discussion with government, quite possibly a lease variation. But in the principle of activating our suburbs and making them vibrant and active and safe more hours of the day, then small businesses are a really lovely way to go.
All right, and just finally, zooming out a little on the overall objective of Infill here, Catherine, it is a government goal to have or maintain about 70% of new housing in existing suburbs. So how much needs to happen in the low density areas of our suburbs to keep it at that level?
It's worth being aware that RZ1 is about 70% of our existing developed footprint. So it's an extraordinarily large area available for some densification. Now, it's not going to go from 0 to 100 overnight, but we have a very large area of really generous land planning that we can afford to develop. So I think this planning reform allows that development to happen in a fairly natural way.
But you're assuming strong take-up, are you? Because set against this, of course, is population growth.
So that we know there's pent-up demand. We know there are positive and negative levers on both sides. Exactly how much is taken up, I'm not not a forecaster,
okay.
but I strongly believe there's going to be a really positive response to this.
Well, we are, as we said at the outset, Catherine, at the beginning of this conversation. No doubt there'll be more instalments. Thanks for joining us on State Line.
Thanks, Greg.